the Open Meetings Act posted here in the council chambers. If you'll now rise with me for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call, please, Beth.
Granquist.
Here.
Langy.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
Clausen.
Here.
Murin.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Faust.
Here.
File.
Here.
Okay, look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Motion is second. Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
And a motion to approve the full agenda.
So move, Your Honor. Second.
Motion is second. Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Okay, that moves us to item number 23 on the agenda, special presentations. Proclamation for November 2017 as Read Aloud to a Child Month. Whereas literacy is the fundamental building block of all learning and is essential to the growth and success of every child in our city, and reading to children enlarges their vocabulary and enhances their listening skills, thereby fostering intellectual growth and a more positive attitude toward reading. Reading to a child is a simple and priceless act that benefits both adult and child, positively contributing to family literacy and strengthening the bond between a parent and child. When parents assume the responsibility for children's literacy, making a commitment to reading for 15 minutes a day, children become more healthy, resilient, and inquisitive. And Read Aloud to Your Child for 15 minutes a day is a nationally recognized program that has been in existence for more than 25 years. Read Aloud Norfolk, the Norfolk Public Library, Norfolk area schools, and other organizations representing parents, teachers, librarians, and concerned citizens advocate for reading aloud to children because it fosters healthy interaction between adults and children. And reading aloud to children will enhance family literacy and the well-being of young people throughout our city. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Josh Moning, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim November 2017 as Read Aloud to a Child Month in the City of Norfolk and the surrounding area, and encourage all parents, teachers, librarians, and other caring adults to read aloud to a child. Do we have a group here to accept the proclamation? Good.
Mayor Mooney, these students are from Norfolk Catholic Elementary, and we promote reading, of course, at Norfolk Catholic Elementary. Our principal, Mr. LaFleur, is here, and he does a lot of reading aloud. Every night we have a program where the families are supposed to read at night, and then we document their reading, and we keep track of how many readers we have every day. And we reward that by having smart kids who like to read.
Very good. Well, okay, can you introduce yourself and the kids introduce themselves? Okay.
Lisa Kemper, I'm the director of reading at Norfolk Catholic Elementary.
Can you say your name and then your grade?
My name is Kennedy, and my grade is second grade. My name is Knox. My grade is first grade. My name is Elizabeth. My grade is first grade. My name is Mallory, and I'm in fourth grade. My name is Brinley. My grade is first grade.
My name is JC, and I'm in sixth grade.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. Are you guys reading to your parents?
Thank you very much.
Here, who wants to take this? All right, very good. Thanks a lot. All right, next, item 24, recognition of the 2017 Norfolk 101 Citizens Academy, and we had another big group this year. Tonight, we recognize the 5th class of Norfolk 101 Citizens Academy. There have been 77 citizens altogether who have completed this 8-week program. In 2016, 13 of these citizens were serving on a board or commission for the city. Norfolk 101 was started in 2014 to give Norfolk citizens an opportunity to go behind the scenes of city government to see firsthand the diverse operation of the divisions responsible for our roads, clean water, parks, public safety, and a host of other services. Each Tuesday night, the group met at one of the city divisions for 3 hours. 3 hours, that's a commitment, to listen to presentations from city managers and staffs and tour city facilities. Thanks to the Norfolk 101 participants who gave of their time to be involved in this program, and also to the City of Norfolk division managers and staff who gave the presentations and tours. I have certificates of graduation. I think everybody graduated this year, which is a positive thing. So I'll ask you, as I read your name, to come up front. First certificate goes to one of our very own planning commission members, Jacob Bell.
Thank you.
I think we want to get a picture so you can line up just back there. Jamie Winter. Sandy Wolf. Kristen Anuta. Is that right?
That's right.
Jim McCarthy. You're on the bubble. There's a notation here.
Nice to see the Irish are represented.
April Martin. Amy Leather. Amy's not here tonight, okay. Mandy D. Okay. Jim Powell. Austin Castleberry. Last but not least, Jordan. All right, here's your 2017 Norfolk Citizens 101. And thanks again, everyone, for taking the time to do that. The first step to making. Oh, I didn't. Oh, they're gone. I was gonna say some more stuff. They don't care. I was just gonna say the first step to making change in the community is getting engaged, and so we appreciate you taking the time to do that. Thanks again. Yeah. All right, moving on. To public hearings and related action. Item number 25, I will open this public hearing regarding the 16-DTR-005 Community Development Block Grant received by the City of Norfolk to conduct a downtown revitalization study. And Jan, please come forward.
Your Honor, this is actually a second public hearing, which is required for each CDBG-funded project to obtain citizens' input, comments, and opinions regarding the programs that was funded. So the 16 DTR 005 grant for the city of Norfolk, they requested $30,000 of community development funds, of which $27,000 was used to conduct a downtown revitalization study. $3,000 was used for general admin of the project, and the city itself provided $9,000 as local match. The total project cost was $39,000.
Very good, thank you, Jan. Any questions, council, for Jan on this process?
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to come forward and make comment may do so at this time. If not, I will close the hearing, and we will move to item number 26. We'll open the public hearing on an appeal filed by John and Karen Dofide regarding a conditional use permit for Alvin G. Beckman to operate a commercial dog kennel at 5301 West Benjamin Avenue. And at the beginning of this hearing, I will note some of the parameters moving forward. This hearing results from the appeal of the granting of a conditional use permit by the Planning Commission to Alvin G. Beckman for a commercial kennel at 5301 West Benjamin Avenue. The appeal was filed by John and Karen Dofide. The hearing shall be conducted informally. Each witness may present his or her testimony in narrative fashion and shall state his or her name and address prior to commencing his or her testimony for the record. This hearing will not be conducted using the strict rules of evidence, and the City Council may admit and give probative effect to evidence which possesses probative value, commonly accepted by reasonably prudent persons. Elected officials may question any witness at any time during the proceeding, and the order of the proceedings for conducting the hearing shall be as follows. We'll have an introduction by our city planner, Valerie Grimes, presentation of evidence and witnesses by Mr. Koppel on behalf of John and Karen Dofide, presentation of evidence and witnesses by others opposed to the conditional use permit, then presentation of evidence and witnesses by Alvin G. Beckman, the applicant granted the conditional use permit, and any presentation of evidence and witnesses by others supporting the granting of the CUP. Finally, rebuttal evidence by Mr. Koppel on behalf of the Dofides, if desired, and rebuttal evidence by Alvin Beckman, if desired. With that, Valerie, will you please kick it off for us and introduce the issue?
Yes, thank you. I've brought up the aerial image so that everybody can kind of see where we're at. This is in the northwest corner of Deer Hollow, and the northern building right here is the Beckman property, with the garage to the north of that houses the dogs that they wish to have as the kennel, and the house to the south there is the Dofide house that presented the appeal to the conditional use permit. The both properties are zoned agriculture. All of Deer Hollow is zoned ag, and so that's just kind of a general feel of the property. And then I'd like to go through some exhibits and ask for those to be part of the record. So the exhibits that I would like to be part of the record would be number 1, the conditional use permit application form A and justification form B, received March 30th, 2017. Exhibit 2, the 300-foot boundary map. 3 is the abstractor certificate. 4 is the notice of the Planning Commission meeting September 19th, 2017. 5 is the proof of publication for Planning Commission meeting September 19th, 2017. 6 is the notice of public hearing Wednesday, September 19th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. 7 is the proof of publication of Planning Commission public hearing Wednesday, September 19th, 2017. Then 8, we have notice of public hearing Tuesday, September 19th, 2017, Planning Commission meeting. 9 is proof of publication of Planning Commission public hearing Tuesday, September 19th, 2017. 10 is erroneously noticed public hearing notice statement. 11 is the Planning Commission Resolution Number 2017 PC-7. 12, the September 19th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting minutes. 13 is the October 3rd, 2017 Planning Commission meeting minutes. 14 is the appeal of the conditional use permit resolution number 2017 PC-7, received October 12th, 2017. 15 is the notice of city council meeting November 6th, 2017. 16, proof of publication of city council meeting November 6th, 2017. 17 is the notice of public hearing, November 6th, 2017 city council meeting. And then 18 is the proof of publication of city council public hearing, November 6th, 2017. Mayor, do you accept these?
The exhibits are received. Thank you, Val. Okay. Thank you, Val. At this time, we would ask for presentation of evidence and witnesses by Mr. Koppel on behalf of John and Karen Dovite.
Do I need to introduce myself
I think I already have.
and say what grade I'm in?
Please.
Post-elementary.
Yeah, there should be a form there for you to sign in, though, Dave.
Okay. He spent the last 3 years of his life. All right. I appear this evening on behalf of John and Karen Dovite. I am uncertain, I received an email, but I'm uncertain, so I brought copies just in case. I had sent a letter to Mr. Shukai, and attached to that letter was a title report together with documents that are referenced therein. That is to be marked as Exhibit 19. Did all of the council members receive copies of that? Okay, I have copies.
I'm gonna go through it and then I'll distribute it.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Exhibit 19 is received.
Any more copies?
Yeah, I have some other documents. Then I'll have what is a 3-page document that I'll mark as Exhibit 20. And that consists of 3 pages, consists of letters dated October 21, 2016, from Valerie Grimes to Mr. and Mrs. Beckman. A letter dated March 15, 2017, authored by Valerie Grimes, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Beckman, and a third letter dated June 8th of 2017, authored by Valerie Grimes and addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Beckman. I have copies of that.
Dave, how many other exhibits do you have?
Just one more.
Okay.
How many copies do you have? Because I need
I think I have,
about 15.
I didn't make 15.
I need
Let's,
to give one to the media.
she had
I
already,
had them made 9.
Dave, she had already marked something as 21 for Mr.
20.
Brogan.
Then
So
let's-
can we mark this 20.1 and 20.2?
Oh, we can mark it 23 as far as.
Well, whatever you'd like.
Well, I got 20 marked, so it
All
could
right,
be
let's do
21.
this. For the record, what was marked as 20 is now marked as 23. And I brought one for the mayor and about 8 copies for council members.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Exhibit 23 is received.
Then what I have marked as Exhibit 24, for purposes of the record, are a series of email communications by and between Susan Warnicki, John Dofight, and John Kuba, together with various other letters, copies of photographs that pertain to courtesy notice to Mr. and Mrs. Beckman dated back in August 8th of 2013, and then prior letters to the Beckmans from Mr. Kuba dating as far back as March 21st of 1994, I believe, and September of 1995. And I brought 9 copies of those. The one marked 24 I hand to the mayor. The other 8 didn't put a number on because I wasn't sure.
Thank you, Dave. Exhibit 24 is received.
And I know the council meeting, it has a heavy agenda tonight. And so I'll try not to be too wordy or verbose. The thrust of this appeal filed on behalf of the Dofights really is focused on Exhibit 19. This is a title report that was conducted by the American Title and Escrow Company. I would specifically direct your attention to the document where it says easements, et cetera, on the lower third of Exhibit 19. There's a category that talks about protective and restrictive covenants for Deer Hollow Edition, recorded May 5, 1993 at page M93-5, page 315. And I understand you haven't had an opportunity to look at it, but I will direct your attention to that particular document. It is page 19 and 20 of that title report. It's entitled Protective and Restrictive Covenants. There are 4 covenants that are contained or in that document that I would direct your attention to. First, I would direct your attention to item 5 of the protective covenants that says that no commercial enterprises shall be permitted. And this property, which is the subject of the Beckman's application, is subject to these protective restrictive covenants. The second covenant I'd ask you to look at is item 7, which provides that barns or stables kept for private use shall not be of over 1 story in height. A maximum of 5 animals will be allowed per lot, and no swine will be allowed. Then the third component from these protective covenants that I would direct your attention to is paragraph or protective covenant number 11, which is on the following page. And it provides that these protective covenants run with the land and shall be binding on all parties and all persons claiming under them for a period of 25 years from the date these protective covenants are recorded. And for your information, they were recorded on May 5, 1993. So for a period of 25 years, those would run through May 4th of 2018. And then paragraph 11 continues by stating, after said date, the covenant shall be automatically extended for successive period 10 years, unless an instrument signed or a majority of the then owners of the lots have been recorded, agreeing to change said covenants in whole or in part. And based on Exhibit 19, the title search, there is no recorded amendment or change. And so it's our position that these protective covenants are in full force and effect. And then the fourth component of the protective covenants that I would direct your attention to is paragraph 2. And it specifically talks about violations or threatened or attempted violation of any of these covenants by the present or future owners of any part of said real estate shall give to and vest in any other owner or owners any part of said real estate the right and cause of action to bring and prosecute any and all suits, actions, proceedings at law or in equity to prevent or restrain such violations or threatened or attempted violation, to recover damages therefore, and to seek and recover such other relief and remedies as law or equity allows. It's our position that these protective covenants, to which Lot 3, Block 1, Deer Hollow Addition, Madison County, Nebraska, are subject to, have not been revised, are in full force and effect, and we believe that it is, while the city council can issue a conditional use permit, and in speaking with Mr. Shukai, he was kind enough to say that the city's role is not to enforce protective covenants. I'll concede that for purposes of this evening. But it seems to me we aren't asking you to enforce protective covenants. What we're asking you to do is reverse the Planning Commission's decision so that this city council does not take proactive, active action to create a situation where there is indeed a violation of the protective covenants. Because if this council takes actions tonight, and you are certainly entitled as elected officials to take whatever action you desire, and we respect that very much. But under paragraph 2 of the protective covenants, the Dophites have a cause of action that is potentially out there for them to file in the district court. The Dophites don't want to have to do that. And if you take the action to reverse the Planning Commission's decision, the Beckmans aren't issued the conditional use permit, and therefore they can't house the dogs in the numbers that they have for commercial purposes at this property. The protective covenants say they can have up to 5, but they can't have more than that. And most importantly, the protective covenants say you cannot have commercial enterprises. And I don't believe there's any dispute that if Mr. Beckman stands up here tonight, that he is doing this for commercial purposes. You may ask the question, why did these people wait so long to do anything? And I had marked Exhibits 23 and Exhibits 24 to try to address that with council. They haven't waited so long. They've been trying to be good neighbors. If you look at Exhibit 23 and Exhibit 24, you're going to see where the Dophites have been communicating with city officials for an extended period of time, raising the issue about the dogs and the issues that the dogs are creating. And so we're here tonight asking you to reverse the conditional use permit and so that it is denied. As you all know, being familiar with Norfolk, the Deer Hollow area is an area that consists of large acreages of upscale homes. And when people bought those lots and either built those houses or bought the houses that were existing on the lots that are developed there, they anticipated that they would be in an acreage setting that was quiet, that was peaceful, and that would permit them to enjoy the advantages of living on the outskirts of Norfolk on an acreage. And I know you may say, do the dogs bark? Do they not bark? How often do they bark? The issue is that this has been a constant issue from the Dophites problem perspective for the last several months, the last few years, as reflected in Exhibit 24 and Exhibit 23. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Copley?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. At this time, we will take any further presentation of evidence or witnesses by others opposed to the conditional use permit. Seeing none, we will move to presentation of evidence and witnesses by Alvin G. Beckman. Evening.
My name is Alvin G. Beckman. I live at 5301 West Benjamin Avenue, and I am the party in question with regard to this issue. I would make one comment on the opening statement, or that Tim Brogan is also representing me as an attorney, and he was not part of the opening discussion comments, so Tim is also here on my behalf as well. So just a correction for that standpoint there as well. So we have been through the process with the planning committee for the application for the special use permit, which I started that process for that special use permit, and that permit was approved unanimously by the city planning, or the planning commission. With that being said, there's probably a little bit of history, a little bit of information that I'd like to present to you. And again, I understand as well that you have a limited amount of time this evening. One of the things that I would address is I know that there was previous correspondence from Valerie Grimes with regard to this situation, and I apologize to her and also to you for not taking the action. We had some issues with regard to my workload with the CPA practice that I'm a partner in, and also dealing with the estate of my mother, who passed away last September. So again, I was sorry, and I apologize for not getting to that as actively or as quickly as I should have. But we did take care of the scenario, and that's where we're at now. So as I mentioned, I was going to discuss a little bit of a history with regard to the situation that I'm involved in. I've lived out at 5301 West Benjamin Avenue for approximately 12 years. I do have dogs out there. It's not anything that is not information that has been presented to you. I do have several dogs. They want to have this designated as a commercial kennel, and we will talk about that at a point in time. I believe there was an exhibit number 20 that I had provided.
Yes, Exhibit 20 has been received.
Okay, thank you. And so with that in mind, I guess the topic of the dogs is the fact that they are not engaged on a commercial basis. Does that mean I have an occasional litter? Yes, I do. But the dogs are primarily there as my enjoyment and my relaxation. I don't golf, I don't run, I don't do race cars, I don't fish. The dogs are my rest and relaxation and my release from all the other work situations are my enjoyment. I primarily use them for hunting purposes. I'm an avid waterfowl hunter, which takes me through Canada, South Dakota, Nebraska. I'm an avid upland hunter, do the same thing. But primarily the purpose that I enjoy is the trials and tests. So I go to tests put on by the American Pointing Lab Association, the Hunter Retriever Club Association, and those are my primary purpose with having the dogs. We participate in those events anywhere from Nebraska, Colorado, Kansas, South Dakota, Missouri, and in fact I was in Oklahoma this last fall at a test and trial down there. Again, it's my my purpose of the dogs is for pleasure and my enjoyment. With that being said, we are serious about what we do. We have 2 4-time Grandmaster Pointing Labs. We have 5 advanced pointing retrievers. There are 4 certified pointers. So with that being said, our purpose is not to be a puppy mill as we would think a commercial kennel exists. My primary purpose is to enjoy these dogs, go to hunt competitions and tests, and that's the primary purpose that we have with regard to them. We would, at this point, I guess I would probably switch to the exhibit number 20, which you should all have a copy of. And there is 3 parts to that. There's a part number 1, and that is designated, I guess, what I call as surrounding areas. So it maintains that there is an issue with regard to barking dogs and other concerns with regard to the dog. There are 20 surrounding properties, of which 2 people I was unable to contact. One of them is the Dolphides. So there are 17 property owners that were contacted, and of those 17 property owners, nobody had concerns, nobody had issues, nobody questioned any problems with regard to barking dogs, dogs at large, any of those other types of issues that we would imagine with regard to concerns and problems. I included a copy on the second page of that, the plat area that does show all of the individuals that were contacted with regard to whether they had issues or not issues, and that is there for your information there. So out of those contacted, 100% of them have no issues, have no concerns, have no problem with having the dogs that I have. There also is the 300-foot map is there. Out of the people that I called and talked to, we've already had 4 of the individuals speak in favor of that. One of those is a single parent and could not be here tonight. I don't know, I believe Jim Dool was going to try to make it here tonight to speak, but 4 of the other individuals have already spoken this evening, and previously at the Planning Commission hearing. And so with that being said, I've got 7 out of the 8 within the 300-foot limit that have no concerns about dogs, have no concern about barking, have no concern about at-large, have no concern with regard to health issues, et cetera, et cetera. So wanted to bring that up to the council, that the issue that would be related to an inconvenience to property owners in that area that would potentially affect the value of their properties. Apparently there is not that issue because nobody has a concern on everybody that we have talked with regard to that particular situation. There's an item number 2, and I don't want to go through a lot of this. This is the facilities that we have. There's been questions with regard to the noise aspect of things. We have an outside kennel that's totally enclosed, it's insulated, it's cooled, it's heated. So with that being said, noise is confined to that area, not only because of the insulation, but also the fact that we've got numerous trees, which you will see the property there. The second page that we have there will show a southwest view from the enclosure, which is toward the Dolphide property. If you look at that second page, there's a southwest view on the bottom, and as you can see, there is no visibility. There's a large amount of trees all the way around, so there's not a concern with regard to I believe there's not a concern with regard to that issue with noise, et cetera, et cetera. The dogs are in kennels inside. They're the heavy-duty kennels. They cannot get out. If they get out, there's a fenced-in yard with 5.5+ foot fences all the way around, so they can't escape out of that scenario. So they have no ability to be at large as we go along. I also take the purpose every night. These dogs are fully trained. They're housebroke. They are out 3 times a day, and every evening I take the step of putting them away in the evening at 10:30 or so, approximately every night, into portable kennels and another 20 by 20 insulated shed, so we don't have any concerns with regard to barking dogs at night. So again, trying to be a situation, trying to be cognizant of neighbors and situations with regard to that could be an issue at night. So we take that step every night so that they're put away in another 20 by 20 building that's fully insulated, and they sleep in portable kennels during the evening. The third tab is the fact that we are designated as a commercial kennel through the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. So part of that process to be designated as a commercial kennel through the Nebraska Department of Agriculture is that it is a requirement, and I'll run through those with you, but we wanted to make sure that we were in compliance with the state of Nebraska, and that's also why the applications for the special use permit would be, so we're in compliance with the city of Norfolk and their 2 mile jurisdiction. Part of the comments that I would make, and that information is there if we need to proceed forward with that, is that there are 4 criteria to be defined as a commercial kennel through the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. Item number 1 is I have to sell more than 31 dogs a year. I do not do that. Item number 2 is I have to sell to brokers. I do not do that. I sell anything I have go to private individuals on, and those are, again, limited numbers. Item number 3 is I have to produce 4 or more litters a year. I generally do not do that. So our dogs are designed to be our family, our companions. They are part of our enjoyment, our lifestyle. And so with that being said, we do not breed our dogs on a regular basis. We do not breed our dogs every time they come into a heat cycle. We do not breed our dogs with the intention of mass producing puppies, and we don't breed our dogs with the intention of producing any more than what I maybe have demand for. Okay? As such, then the 4th criteria is I have to have 4 or more dogs intended for breeding purposes. My point with regard to that is that my intention is not for breeding purposes, which goes back to why I do not have numerous litters during the course of a year, and I have less than the 4 as a general rule, so they are not intended for breeding purposes. They're intended for my enjoyment and my passion, which is the hunting aspect of things. Why do I have a couple litters a year? It's to cover my cost of training, it's to cover my cost of vet bills, it's to cover my cost of going trips to Canada, whatever the types of trips that way. So it's just a matter of not doing this as a for-profit type venture. It's doing it as a method of trying to cover costs to do the things I enjoy to do. The dogs that we have, do we have numerous dogs? Yes, we do. I'm not going to say that I do not. But I would also say that with the dogs I have 7 dogs that are 9 years of age or older. Okay? So these dogs are part of the family. These dogs are part of my family. It's part of my life. They have been, they've been loyal to me. They've done whatever I've asked to them. And now in their older years, that's why they're there. I don't have an option of giving dogs away in my mind to someone, because I don't know very many people that want a 9-plus-year-old dog that's going to be coming into potential issues with regard to veterinarian bills, et cetera, et cetera. So they've devoted their life to me. So with that being said, I've devoted my life to making them as comfortable as possible as they go through their life until the very end. With that being said, it puts us in a little bit of a quandary with those dogs. What do we do with them? Again, I use the tail wag theory. If they're not healthy and they're not happy, then they're there, and that's my responsibility to them, is to let them live their life as they need to be. If we are in a position to eliminate dogs, that becomes a very, very personal issue with me, because the alternative on eliminating those dogs is not, it's a difficult personal choice, because that probably means the situation that I'm in is I won't do that, what so many other people do, which is to take them out and put them down or have them euthanized. That becomes a really personal choice for me in this situation. And I guess my point is that if I'm in a commercial kennel scenario where I'm a puppy mill, or I'm in a scenario where these dogs are nothing more than that, I sure would have not the feelings that I do with regard to that issue. So just wanted to make that. The last comment that I would have is that there are various exhibits that Val has turned in. Of them, there are the different exhibits that she has, and one of those things is that they really don't give you the detail with regard to the Planning Commission and their responsibilities. I'm sure you are aware of that. I understand that they're designated as representatives of the city regarding zoning and planning. And I applied for the special use permit so that I am going to be in compliance. And that's what my desire is to be, is so that I'm in compliance with the city. They received my application, which says there. I also want to go to the minutes that is item number 12, which there was one party opposed, and there were myself and 4 others that spoke in favor of the issuance of the permit. We've gone on and we had public input, similar to what we showed tonight, where we had the public concerns or the public support is illustrated in the item number 1 of Exhibit 20 that shows that there's 17 out of 17, and the majority of the people within any sort of a 300-foot process or area, I'm sorry. Part of that process also was the fact that there was a site visitation that was also performed by John Kuba, also by Valerie Grimes, and also with Brian Lundy. And they were there for a site visit to make sure that there's not an issue, or to see that there were concerns, or whether there were anything that would prohibit the issuance of the special use permit. My understanding is they went back and they had their discussions, and we had the other minutes from the next meeting. There's also site visits by other people of the Planning Commission. Sue Beckman was out unbeknownst, and I understand Brian Lundy and his wife also were out at a time. Again, those were times that I was not aware that they were even there, and that sure could have been other people as well. In the minutes of the October 3rd meeting, they had those discussions. They put together the conditional use permit. There were discussions with regard to that. There was a vote on the special use permit, of which was a unanimous vote to approve the issuance of the permit. I guess my understanding would be is that the Planning Commission did their due diligence. That's their responsibility. They're the arm of the City Council in the City of Norfolk. I'm assuming they did their due diligence. They exercised their authority on behalf of the city, and they issued the special use permit with regard to that. So I guess my understanding would be is that the Planning Commission fulfilled their responsibilities, found that there was not concerns or issues based upon their report and based upon their presentation and the passing of the issuance of the special use permit unanimously. And as such, I guess I'm asking or requesting that the City Council then support the issuance of that special use permit as provided by the Planning Commission. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Beckman?
Just one question initially here.
Yes.
When did you first move into the place out there?
Approximately 12 years ago.
So about 2005?
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
I believe we closed on December of 2005.
I mean, the reason I ask, I see the letter of 2003 that is addressing that, so that's
Right,
14 years ago.
right. Where I lived at the previous place, which was 303 Joe Deb Drive, which was in Eastern Heights. Then we had scenarios that there were situations where we received notifications. We took steps to preclude or hopefully solve that. I moved any of the dogs that I did have to an off-site facility, and they were moved out to a West Newcore Road property instead of having them at that area there at the 303 Joe Deb Drive in those earlier years. So we took steps to hopefully solve any concerns or address any concerns that would have been brought up by the city with regard to those issues.
Yeah, and I see where I was confused was because the first one was at Joe Dab Drive, and now you're at 5301 West Benjamin.
Correct.
So, sorry about that.
No, no problem.
At any time, were you a member of the housing
I have not been a member of the homeowners association at the Deer Hollow edition. That has been, we have no property that adjourns the roads of the Deer Hollow edition. The previous owner to us was not a member of the homeowners association for the same reason, and we are not a member. We've not paid any dues, we've not had any correspondence, we don't attend meetings, we don't get notification of meetings, so we're not part of the homeowners association. And I don't have copies of minutes that show that, although I've spoken with some individuals, and of course, I don't get notification about any of the meetings, and I probably don't have access to those. Maybe I do as part of public records, I don't know. But I'm not part of the homeowners association. I don't know if there's any other individuals that would be here to speak. Okay, so if we could, I'm done. If you have any more questions for me.
Approximately how many dogs did you say were on the property?
Right now, 12, of which 7 of those are 9 years or older. One is 6. He has a genetic issue for EIC versus, and also CNM, so we can use him for hunting purposes only. We have one is that less than 9 months old, and so that puts us to where we basically, I think if I did that right, 4 of them that are dogs that we use for our competitions and for our hunting purposes.
What's the greatest number of dogs that you've had on the property at once?
Depends on what we count. Of course, if I don't count a litter of puppies per se, probably the greatest number I've had is 16. At the Planning Commission, I had 16 dogs, of which what the situation was, I had an unexpected litter because a son did not listen on who to let out and who not to let out. And so I had an unexpected litter, of which then normally everything is sold privately and had demand, so I had extra dogs that I started and then sold, and so those are all sold as of started dogs here as of now.
How do you typically sell all of the litters? Do you sell each puppy in a litter, or do you hold some of these dogs back?
Right, we don't do anything through brokers, everything's a private sale. Everything is sold generally as puppies. That's our, is the idea. Again, most of that is people that are repeats and referrals that have met me at competitions and tests and are interested in something like that. Now, do I keep a dog back? Yes, I do, because as I have said, we have 7 older ones. If I don't have somebody coming up, then I have no ability to compete or to run tests if I don't have something else coming up, which is the purpose of.
Are you regularly purchasing older dogs too?
I'm sorry?
Are you regularly purchasing
No.
older dogs?
I do not. I don't purchase other older dogs. I don't train for anybody else. All my training is all my own. I don't train at that site other than basic obedience and other things. I have 2 other training sites, one on West Newcore Road, which I can do upland and retriever training. I have another facility up by Pierce, Nebraska that I can go up and do upland training with regard to that. So I don't do any training. There's no shooting. There's no, no shooting with regard to any of that, with regard to training or any dummy launchers, which would have a noise comparable to a shot. At our facility, we do all of that off-site. And again, we don't train for anybody else. We don't buy other older dogs. Everything that we have are just my own. And so I do keep something back on an occasional basis.
I think I saw in part of the evidence that you're referred to as Beckman's High Pointing Labs.
Beckman's High Point Labs.
High Point Labs. Are you registered as a business entity?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not registered as any business entity that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't, as far as with an organization or with any sort of group or, professional organization, I'm not.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Beckman?
You use that name just to, when you show the dogs or take them in trials?
Right, when I go to the test, that's the name that we've used for, 25 years or plus that we've gone to the test and the events. So I use it just for that purpose, just because it identifies me separate from somebody else. And the Beckman's High Point Labs is because there's other High Point Labs out there. There's a kennel up in, a commercial kennel up in South Dakota that uses the High Point Labs designation as well. So we've picked the Beckman on front of that for that purpose.
Other questions? Mr. Beckman? All right, thank you, Mr. Beckman. At this point, any other presentation of evidence or witnesses supporting the granting of the conditional use permit?
Good evening. My name is Ray Stala, and I'm Mr. Beckman's neighbor. We've lived next door to the property since '97, and we really don't have any problems with his dogs running loose or barking. There's lots of dogs in the neighborhood. You know, we're out in the country, so there's turkeys and cows and horses and things that make noise, but I guess from my point of view, we don't have any issues or problems. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stone. Any others wishing to come forward?
My name is Glenn Hinkle. I am soon to be the nearest neighbor. You can't quite see me, I'm just across the fence line to the north there. And I would echo Mr. Stala's points that during our house construction, we have 400 and something acres of my father's farm to find a place to select to build our house. And there were a lot of places we could have. And from our looking around the farm, this place had water, had some electric, and that was kind of what pushed us to look there. But certainly the noise of the dogs has never been an issue during our construction, during our being there. We measured it today from our front door to the front door of the kennel is right at about 300 feet. And we are, yeah, right where that point is there on that circular tent-looking building. I'm an artist, so I built a round house. But from there to the kennel is right about 300 feet. So I think we're probably the closest neighbor from our front door, at least to the noise that would be there. And they certainly haven't been an issue for us. Now, we're not there permanently yet, but we have had a lot of time there on the property and remarked that for as many dogs as may be there at any time, we certainly don't hear them. I'm a little afraid if there's this much uproar over this, at what there's gonna be for our 3 Jack Russells. But we'll have to deal with that once we move. But, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hinkle.
Good evening. I'll try to be short. Not easy for a lawyer. One thing that I found out, I went out there yesterday myself and walked it. Interesting though, of the 12 or 13, I think it was 12 dogs out there, is virtually one thing he didn't notice or note to the council is that most of these dogs are debarked. So I think there's only 4 or 5 that have the ability to even bark themselves, and I think that's important the council to be aware of that. I would tell you this much, I appreciate Mr. Koppel's comments relative to the ongoing problem that's been going on out there. I can tell you this much, Mr. Beckman has had 1 contact in his 12 years of living out there from any law enforcement agency, city, county, or state. And that was a number of years ago. The county came out, the deputy sheriffs, to ask about and check on barking dogs or the noise. So when this ongoing problem keeps being talked about, I'll tell you this much, that's news to Mr. Beckman because he's had only 1 contact. Another thing is there's been no issuance of any citations or anything of that or prosecutions relative to dog at large, nuisance, disturbing the peace, anything of that nature. As you can see, it appears that there's 1 neighbor that does have an issue. From a legal standpoint, I think it's important for the council to hear about the legal, because typical of lawyers, we come up there and we throw this legal jargon at you, and what does that really mean? I would tell you this much, I appreciate the concerns relative to the homeowners association and the issuance of protective covenants and things of that. My advice to the council is this, is that this would be a first impression by the council to ever enforce private protective covenants. And if you go down this road tonight with council's recommendation that you do that, I'm going to tell you that every time your staff goes out to look at a building permit or anything else, they're going to have to go then do a title search and make sure that there is a compliance with private aspects. That is not the role nor the responsibility of the city of Norfolk. The role of the city of Norfolk is to remain compliant with its codes and regulations. Application has been made. It is compliant with code and with regulations. If you go down this road tonight regarding basically enforcement of private restrictions on properties, I'm going to tell you, you're going to be here a lot longer meetings going forward, because that's where they're going to come. And interesting of note is Mr. Koppel makes note of the final paragraph of the 4 covenants. That's referencing going to a court. That's not here. This is a public body to enforce public codes and regulations, and that's what's gone on here. It was reviewed unanimously and approved by the Planning Commission, and that's why we're here. So I think you're pressed to only approve this as you go forward, because otherwise I think you're going down a slippery slope of enforcing those private interests. So any questions for me? And I would say this on the homeowners. I think Mr. Cobb is going to come up and say, yes, he is. I would tell you that he does not pay dues, never has. He does not get notices. He's never attended a meeting. But I think the title report would show that his tract of property could be in it. I believe there is minutes. We didn't bring those that say that he's never been invited to any meeting, no notices and things of that nature. So once again, you're not a courtroom. It's not for you to decide whether he is bound by those private restrictions or not. That's a different forum. So. Any questions? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
All right, we'll move to any others wishing in support of the conditional use permit. If not, we'll move to rebuttal evidence by Mr. Koppel on behalf of the Dophites. Sorry.
Thank you. Let me start my rebuttal argument by saying this. Dophites aren't asking you to enforce the protective covenants. They're asking you not to take affirmative action to issue this conditional use permit. Councilman Lange, you asked about some other property. If we look at Exhibit 24, which are the letters that you were looking at, I would direct your attention to, it's about the 3rd page. It's on City of Norfolk letterhead. It says courtesy notice. It's dated August 8th of 2013. It references a letter. The letter is dated April 8th of 2008. That's the following page. In the letter of April 8th of 2008, it specifically says at the second to the last paragraph, while private kennels are allowed in many zoning districts, commercial kennels are allowed as a permitted use only in certain industrial zones. And you'll note in the introductory paragraph, it's referencing 5301 West Benjamin Avenue. And you'll also note that it references 13 dogs at the present time. Mr. Brogan and Mr. Beckman said that he'd had no prior notice, except for one where the county sheriff, or Madison County Sheriff apparently went out. This letter was sent by the city of Norfolk. It gave the Beckmans notice in 2013 that there were issues with respect to the dogs. Mr. Beckman would have you believe that he tries to comply with with everything, but I think when you look at Exhibit 24 and the letters dealing with the prior location where he resided, and then look at the letter that I've just referenced and the courtesy notice that I've just referenced, I think it shows a pattern of disregard for the rules, the regulations that are in place. I think that argument is further bolstered when you look at Exhibit 23, which are the letters from the city officials. And when you particularly look at the dates of those are back in October 21 of 2016, March 15 of 2017, where the Beckmans are given notice that you received a kennel license. And you've got to take some steps. By definition, it's a commercial kennel. Mr. Beckman can stand here and say that this is for recreational purposes. I understand that. But the letters that the city itself issues, as far back as 2013, describe this as a commercial kennel. And the protective covenants say you shouldn't have commercial kennels. And so to say that I tried to comply with everything, there is a pattern and a history with respect to this particular property as far back as 2013, where there was no compliance. We look at the comments about, that Mr. Beckman makes about he's got 7 dogs that are 9 years of age or older. He says he's lived there for 12 years. One, by inference, has to assume that he's had those 7 dogs there for 9 years, all in direct contradiction to what the rules and regulations provide for. With respect to Mr. Hinkle, Glenn Hinkle, he said his property's to the north of Mr. Beckman's. Mr. Hinkle's property isn't subject to the same protective covenants that we've talked about this evening. The protective covenants are clear. Mr. Beckman knew of those protective covenants when he bought the property. Mr. Beckman has, for at least since 2013, operated a kennel in direct contradiction and disregard for the rules and the regulations that are implemented by the city and the protective covenants that govern his land.
Mr. Koppel, where does it show that he was aware of the covenants? Did he sign anything?
When you buy your property, sir, you receive property, and there are transactions that deal with the acquisition of property, and there is a presumption that if a document is recorded of record, and in this case, it is recorded of record. Exhibit 19 shows you the date, the time, and the page that those documents were recorded in the Register of Deeds office.
And when he bought it, was that brought it up to his attention?
That document is filed of record. So you are on notice that document, when you buy it, that document's in place.
So if I was to go buy it and I didn't ask and they didn't give me a piece of paper,
You're on notice.
it'll be my fault.
You're on notice. It's your fault. I want to talk about one other point, and then I'll sit down. Mr. Beckman talks about this is for family and his relaxation, and I understand the stresses of being professional life, but he has a website, and it's at http://www.pointinglabretrievers.com. He proudly displays his master pointing retrievers, that they're grand master pointing retrievers, and he gives his phone number and he gives his contact information so that he can sell dogs. That is commercial by definition. That is commercial, and when you look at Exhibit 23 and the letters issued by your city employee, she says that it's commercial. And we just respectfully request that you take action not to grant this particular conditional use permit. Thank you.
On the website that you referenced, is there pricing information on there? Is there anything that would indicate to anyone that this is a for sale?
Well, it says puppies available, viewing Point Lab. So if you're saying puppies available, and if you're putting it on the web, want to conclude that when you say puppies available, that they're for sale. I'd be happy to give you my copy of what I have, but it's there and it says Puppies available, view pointing lab. So I can,
I have it right here.
pardon me?
I can bring it up right here, but thank you.
That's what I thought you did. That's why I was reciting the website so you can look at it. It's better than the copy that we make. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Koppel? Rebuttal by Mr. Beckman or Mr. Brogan?
Mr. Beckman can come up and speak to this, but I would tell you as to the website, this was a situation where a client owed him funds, and so in lieu of exchange, he created the website. So this wasn't paid for, it was just an exchange. And I would just tell you this much, again, you know, we're here to be compliant. You know, should we have been here before? I don't know, but we are. We are on notice, we are here, we're trying to become compliant. I think that's why the process is what it was that we went through. Same thing out there, you know, if we're gonna question these things, I would tell you this much, and I think the city could tell you that there's probably a number of building permits that were issued by the city of Norfolk out in that addition that probably did not, I know they did not comply with those protective covenants. But did those building permits meet city codes and regulations? And the answer is yes. If there's issues out there with the private owners relative to those protective covenants, that's up to them, as you read in that document, for them to deal with, enforce, and deal with, not here. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brogan. Okay, at this point, I will close the public hearing, and we move to council consideration. Again, as a reminder, what's before us, we're considering a resolution related to the appeal of a conditional use permit that was granted by the Planning Commission. At this point, would look for a motion from the council for consideration of a resolution that either reverses the conditional use permit, affirms the conditional use permit, or modifies the conditional use permit.
Option 4.
There's,
Well,
there's always an
I'm looking at about
option to
90
table.
pages of submittals, items that were submitted to town. And to be fair, with all parties invested in this, I think there should be some time for review of what I'm looking at here. I'm thumbing through it literally as fast as I can, but, you know, I think to vote good consciously, in my opinion, we have to have some time to hash through this and see what we're looking at here. So I can respect where both parties are coming from, but.
Other thoughts on that?
Hey, I guess, and I have to agree to a point on that, because, yeah, I mean, walk in here and I get half of a spec book worth of documentation and stuff like that, but I think, do we not need to, and Clint, this is kind of directed more to you, do we not need to have a motion of some sort, and then a tabling action if we wanted to do that, or can we?
What you have before you in the agenda is what the mayor mentioned, as reverse, affirm, or modify. A, B, and C are
Right.
in there because that's the order in which the code is. You might consider merely moving resolution 2017-76 without the version A, without the version B, without the version C, and just then tabling it. Or any of them. You've got 3 resolutions in your agenda. Resolution 2017-76 version A, B, and C respectively. So they all bear that same number.
So I think Councilman Langy's question is that
Do
could
we
a
have
motion
to-
to table be made from the floor without entering into a motion for either A, B, or C?
I'm sorry,
'Cause-
did I miss something?
Did I summarize the question correctly?
I guess
Yeah.
what I was asking was, okay, if we're gonna move a resolution, we have to move a resolution that's either affirmative, reversal, or modification thereof.
Yep.
And so, regardless of whichever one happens, we just can't go to tabling it without having a resolution of at least one of those three.
Correct.
What's that?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. With that being said then, I would move that the conditional permit resolution be reversed at this time so that at least we get some action on it.
Okay, there's been a motion
Second.
for reversal and a second. Discussion?
So at this time, then, we can't, I was looking for a motion to modify.
The motion,
I know.
the
I realize
motion is
it's
for
been
reversal,
seconded.
so that now,
Go ahead.
okay, now, I believe if I'm correct,
If
that
someone was
offers us the opportunity
wishing to
to
make a motion to
make
table,
a
it could be
motion to
done. now.
table it.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean that this reversal resolution would even pass, but the motion for tabling it could occur.
So he's not reversed right now. That's just the motion.
It's gotta be
We're
voted on.
discussing the motion, at which time a motion to table could occur.
So you can motion to table now or motion to table after the vote?
No, you can't do it after you
Okay,
vote.
then I would motion to
Right.
table now.
All right, motion to table with a second. Any discussion on that? If no discussion, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, motion to table Resolution 2017-76 carries.
Okay. We now move to other public hearings on the agenda. We enter into a series of public hearings related to international codes, mechanical codes, residential codes, building codes, property maintenance codes, plumbing codes, fire codes. Don't everybody act so excited about it. I will jointly open these public hearings, these 7 hearings, items number 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, and 40. And to kick us off in discussion on that, Valerie, you get the honors. Congratulations.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Probably the best one to bring up to discuss these would be Trent, but this is, I believe, the state requirement going from 2006 code to 2012. So if I could bring Trent up to talk about it, that would be great.
Oh, okay. Trent, now it's your turn.
Mayor, council, good evening.
Evening.
I see Val, man, she got rid of that quick.
Yeah, he handed it right off.
I'm not gonna bore you with bringing all the books for ICC code. Obviously, there's lots of books involved with every change. Come on, Clint, he's looking at me really. But obviously, state law went to 2012 as a minimum. So we're catching up to that. We've been in 06 code for, how many years have we been in 06, Steve? 7-ish, 8, so we've been there a while. The 06 code books, actually, if you're gonna build something, you'd probably have to order those books on eBay. ICC code don't even offer them anymore. And/or it's easier for most architects and engineers to build to a higher standard, usually to a 12. 15 code is out, and now 18 code is out now as well, so we are just coming up to the minimum. I can go through each one of these if you wish, or if you have specific questions to start out with, we can go that route. Obviously, it can get very in-depth. I brought most of the prevention staff here. Paul, who's a mechanical plumbing guy, is sick, so he is not available. But if there's other questions, and we can go in through some of the specifics, there's several things that got easier, and I'm sure there's gonna be some things that got maybe harder, depending on whose eyes is on it, so.
Trent, how many specifics are you speaking about? Generally, 24, a dozen, 10?
I did not count them. You know, the books are thick, obviously, and you're
No,
very well aware of that.
Right.
So I did not do a specific count of every year, every cycle, we do a significant changes. So we do order the books, and we review the significant changes from each code cycle. Some of those things, we amend out. We don't, we have a great relationship with the Home Builders Association. Steve spends a lot of time with them. A lot of concerns, on that end, with sprinklers, that's been amended out. Also the hard lid, you know, that's a tough one for me on the fire side because, now the light forms or the TGIs and some of the construction methods, it's strong. With a fire load, it fails about the same time the first truck gets there. And that's a national study, and it's been tested and improved. So I had a tough time, but I also understand on the construction side, it's very difficult to hard lid, excuse me, everything. And then go back in and add a circuit or plumbing, or, because you have to rip the lid back down, which requires another permit to put up 32 square feet of sheetrock, So there were a couple things that we amended out. One of the other amendments is, and has always been contentious with the smaller businesses, is the water fountains or the water coolers. So that has got better, so with the square footage wise, so.
Trent, how are these changes typically communicated to people impacted by them?
Well, a lot of architects, engineers are ready to that. You know, if they're building to that standard, they are aware of them. And then we learn as we go as well. I mean, we really do. There's a lot of things, and we'll probably be before you again if something comes up that we need to amend or change in the future, that we've always been willing to listen for that. And I think we've done it many a time where we've amended things or worked through some problems, so.
So we're looking at 2012 codes, and as I understand it, that's adoption. The adoption process is typically not an immediate one. The state, as I understand it, just adopted these 2012 codes. Is that correct?
They went to 12 as a minimum, and some communities are actually going above that already. I mean, how many is that? 15? You can come up, Steve, if you want. You might as well join the party up here.
There's several communities throughout the state that they stay up to date. They're already on the 2015 and will be adopting the 2018 actually here soon. I know the Nebraska Code Officials Association is talking to a state senator at this time about sponsoring the adoption of the 2018 in the next legislative session. But we really have to probably do this. It affects our ISO rating at this point, and so we could be back here in a year or two asking to go to the 2018 as well.
Steve, do you know how many of those 15 are cities of the first class?
There's, I know Kearney is. There was another community, I think it was Bellevue, is in 2015. They're looking at going to 2018 already. So Kearney is very aggressive about doing it. They always are almost immediately going to the next, the newest code cycle. So, you know, different communities approach that differently.
And with your ear to the ground in some of those communities, are you hearing anything that's
No problems, really. I mean,
turned upside down or being
no,
problematic?
I mean, when you really look at it, 90% of the book from the 06 to the 12 or the 15 or the 18, 90% is probably the same.
Same, yeah.
It's repeat.
I mean, it really is. There are some things that change, but lately they've actually gotten, during the code hearings, they've softened some of that up. One of the examples is in the commercial The guardrail heights are actually going down to 36, where they're now 42. So that's a change where I always thought in residential it would go up to meet the commercial. It just went the opposite way. So
I think that's indicative of the older population, we're all shrinking.
yeah.
You are.
So I think some things are easier getting back that way.
Thank you.
What's funny about this is, the reason I'm sitting here right now is because of the adoption of the '06 code. That's what got me out of the woodwork and out into public life here, but Shane's laughing because you're.
And we're all better for it.
Yeah. But I think you guys did a great job talking about the things that were kind of causing some heartburn and what you guys have kind of left out or omitted from this. And I think everybody in the industry is pretty much aware of what we're looking at here tonight, you know, so. But yeah, the three main things you talked about, Trent, were caused the most heartburn.
Another big one was a post and beam or pole construction. So that is in here, a plan stamped by a design professional shall not be required for pole, post, and beam structures of 2,400 square feet or less in RRSR or AG. So that's always a big one before too. So
That reduces the cost of those structures by
Does.
about $900.
Yeah.
You know, that's what that stamp costs, and, you know, so, I mean, they're pretty routine buildings. I mean, they're not complicated, and we're just continually having to ask for that, and yet we have that design in the drawer, you know, that's been used in the past, so, we felt that was a pretty good compromise. It allows quite a few of those buildings to go up without needing a stamp.
Yeah.
And we do, before we, you know, bring this to council, you know, or planning commission, we do meet with Home Builder Association, we meet with plumbing contractors, we meet with mechanical contractors, just to get their input as to, you know, what's painful, what we feel we're comfortable changing, and what really is there for a safety matter and probably needs to stay.
There was a reference to ISO before. I don't know what that means, but are there any penalties, so to speak, for us not being current on the most recent code change? It's 2015, in other words.
And Clint, maybe you can answer this more on the legal side, but the state did set forth that a minimum is 2012, and so we're just coming up to that level, not going beyond it, because some of the state language,
Yeah, I think that the state statute says that you ought to adopt 2012 or greater, really, is what the consequence of that is. Doesn't affect the ISO rating. What do you give it to? What's your ISO rating?
The 2 is on the fire side. On the building construction side, it's a 4. And with our last rating, we actually went to a 9 because we didn't have the latest codes adopted that the state of Nebraska had adopted.
And the consequence of the fire rating on the ISO is reflected in insurance premium rates.
it's all premium based.
And
What about the 4 and the 9?
well, same thing. That affects homeowners' insurance rates to some degree. I mean, I think there's probably some debate on how much that actually is,
And
but
so you'd rather have a 4 than a 9?
yeah. And really, the only thing that's holding us back right now to improving our score is getting the codes adopted. And they've extended that for us a couple times.
And we're going to 12 now because it's the minimum, but what's the difference between 12 and 15? Is there a significant difference?
Not much between the 12 and the 18. That's why, you know, if the state does adopt the 18 this coming year, we'll probably come back fairly quickly. Most states, most jurisdictions do skip a cycle. The cycles are actually on a 3-year cycle. You'll find that most jurisdictions and states actually skip a cycle, and so we won't come back in for the 21, most likely. We'll be back for the 24.
Just due to the time it takes to review all that.
And the expense.
And then a year usually goes by, and the books are very expensive. We buy multiple sets, so it's a big line item budget.
I'm gonna have an old one on eBay here pretty soon.
See,
I get it.
there's 6 coming up for sale.
Yeah.
If you have a project started, does this, and you do a code change in the middle of the project,
No.
does that affect the project that's already started?
And in fact, if they've if someone comes in with a project that they've already, had architects, engineers working on, if they can show us that they've started this, 6 months ago, we'll still let them go with the 06. At some point, we cut that
Yeah, we gotta
out.
put
3
it-
to 4 months down the road,
Yep.
we wouldn't expect to have to do that anymore, but, right now, we would kind of, I don't hate to use the word grandfather, but we would let them use what they've, designed for.
Okay. Any further questions? For Trent or Steve? No? All right, thanks, guys.
You bet.
Thanks.
This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to come forward with comment can do so now. Big rush to the microphone. Seeing none, I will close the discussion and ask for a planning commission report.
I will combine that and say that the Norfolk Planning Commission held public hearings on October 17, 2017 to consider all the proposed international code changes, updates, and approved all of the amendments on a 7-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing and move to item number 29. I look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5499, approving an amendment to section 6-106 of the city code to adopt the 2012 International Mechanical Code to replace section 6-107 of the city code and to enact a new section 6, not done yet.
Sorry.
dash 107 in its place.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion? Please vote. Oh, short title. Got ahead of myself. Sorry about that.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 6-106 of the official city code to adopt the 2012 International Mechanical Code, to repeal Section 6-107 of the official city code, and to enact a new Section 6-107 in its place.
Okay, now please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5499 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I'd move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5499 on second and third reading.
Okay, motion and second. If no discussion on that, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5499 carries on second and third.
Item number 31, and look for consideration of ordinance number 5500, approving an amendment to section 1-161 of the city code to adopt the 2012 International Residential Code to repeal section 6-162 of the city code and to enact a new section 6-162 in its place, and to enact section 6-163 of the code to include provisions related to walls and ceilings.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 6-161 of the official city code to adopt the 2012 International Residential Code, to repeal Section 6-162 of the official code and enact a new Section 6-162 in its place, to enact Section 6-163 of the code to include provisions related to walls and ceilings.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5500 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5500 on second and third. Second.
Okay, motion is second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? If not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5500 carries on second and third.
Item number 33, look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5501, approving an amendment to section 6-16 of the city code to adopt the 2012 International Building Code, to repeal section 6-18 of the city code and to enact a new section 6-18 in its place, and to enact 6-20 of the code to include provisions related to walls and ceilings.
So move, Your Honor.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion. If not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 6-16 of the official city code to adopt the 2012 International Building Code, to repeal Section 6-18 of the official code, to enact a new Section 6-18 in its place, to enact Section 6-20 of the code to include provisions related to walls and ceilings, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5501 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5501 on second and third. Second.
Okay, motion second to suspend the rules. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5501 carries on second and third.
Item number 35, look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5502, approving an amendment to section 6-181 of the city code to adopt the 2012 International Property Maintenance Code, to repeal section 6-183 of the city code and to enact a new section 6-183 in its place.
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, short title, Beth?
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 6181 of the official city code to adopt the 2012 International Property Maintenance Code, to repeal Section 6183 of the official city code, to enact a new Section 6183 in its place, and to provide for publication of the ordinance in pamphlet form.
Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5502 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5502 on second and third reading.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to suspend the rules. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5502 carries on second and third.
Item number 37, I look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5503, approving an amendment to section 6-121 of the city code to adopt the 2012 International Plumbing Code, to repeal section 6-122 of the city code and to enact a new section 6-122 in its place.
I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5503.
Second.
Motion is second. Short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend section 6121 of the official city code to adopt the 2012 International Plumbing Code, to repeal section 6122 of the official city code and to enact a new section 6122 in its place, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5503 carries on first reading.
I move that we suspend the rules on ordinance number 5503 and pass on second and third.
Second.
Motion second to suspend the rules. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5503 carries on second and third.
Item number 39, look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5504, approving an amendment to section 8-26 of the city code to adopt the 2012 International Fire Code, to repeal section 8-28 of the city code and to enact a new section 8-28 in its place.
Your Honor, I move consideration of ordinance 5504.
Second.
Motion second. No discussion. Short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 826 of the official city code to adopt the 2012 International Fire Code, to repeal Section 8-28 of the official city code and to enact a new Section 8-28 in its place, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5504 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5504 on second and third.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Did you get that, Beth?
I think so.
Okay. To suspend the rules, if no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5504 carries on second and third.
Hey, last but not least, item number 41. Look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5505, approving an amendment to section 6-171 of the city code to adopt the 2009 International Energy Conservation Code, to amend section 6-173 of the code to update minimum requirements for energy conservation standards.
So move.
Second.
One question, sorry. Val, this one's 2009 compared to 2012. Can we talk about that for just a second? Just for public clarity's sake.
Let's have Steve take a stab at that.
bring it back.
So the state of Nebraska also adopts the energy code, and then each jurisdiction is required to adopt it in turn. Last time that the state of Nebraska adopted, it was the 2009. We are actually still on the 2004 that we had amended heavily, and as with the 2009, we have amended that fairly heavily as well.
Okay.
So I would expect the state to adopt a new energy code, probably 18. What they look at is there's enough savings from going to one energy code to another to justify doing it. And in the 12s and 15s, they decided there wasn't.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks, Steve.
You bet.
Any discussion on that? Comments, questions? If not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 6-171 of the official city code to adopt the 2009 International Energy Conservation Code, to amend Section 6-173 of the code to update minimum requirements for energy conservation standards, to provide when the ordinance is in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of the ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5505 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5505 on second and third.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay, motion and second to suspend the rules. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5505 carries on second and third.
Okay, item number 42, I will open this public hearing at the request of Trevor Boardman Construction LLC to consider a zoning change from R1 Single Family Residential District to R2 1 and 2 Family Residential District at 221 Jackson Avenue. And Val, can you give a little, you're welcome to come forward, can you give a little introduction of this, please?
Yes, thank you. I've put this up on the screen. It's down here on Jackson Avenue. It is in an R1 zoning district. You can see there is other zonings next to it. Just so that you all know, at the Planning Commission, there was a petition to deny the request to consider a zone change that was signed by some neighbors. There were 25 signatures. Of those, 6 were property owners within 300 feet. 7 were with property owners outside 300 feet, and then 12 of them were non-property owners. And so there is that over the 20%, but because this is actually in conformance, the request is in conformance with what the comprehensive plan suggests for that area, you can still pass this on 5 votes. You do not need a 6th vote because of the opposition.
Okay, thank you, Val. Welcome, good evening.
So, we got it passed by the
Can you
zoning committee.
tell us your name and
Oh,
there
my
should be a sign-in sheet for you to.
Yeah, my name's Chris Hupp. I'm a co-owner, Boardman Construction.
Okay.
We got it passed by the zoning committee. A couple of neighbors had concerns about parking. That was the only issue that they brought up. And the plan that we have is to build a duplex with 2-car garages on each side. So they'd have 4 parking spaces per unit. And that was enough to satisfy the zoning committee that they'd have sufficient parking. And it was passed. And we'd like to get started on the project as soon as possible if we can get it approved.
Okay. So a duplex with 2 2-car garages, correct?
Yep.
And parking seemed to be the contentious issue with.
That was their concern during the zoning meetings.
Okay. Any questions, council?
What's the approximate square footage of the duplexes you're looking at doing?
Each side is 1,200 square feet.
2 bedrooms?
3 bedroom.
3 bedroom.
It's a really deep lot. It's 75 by 120 or something deep.
Any further questions?
Rents are average to the other residences down there now? Are they expected to be higher?
We're not sure if we're gonna sell the units or rent them. We're initially trying to sell them, so.
But if you are not successful in the sale of that, how would the rents that you would ask for compare to what else is in the neighborhood?
Yeah, we're gonna do moderate finishes and try and keep it priced comparable to the neighborhood. We don't wanna make something that's priced too high for what the neighborhood that it's in.
This was an empty lot, correct?
It had a house on it that we knocked down. It had a condemned house on it. It's been knocked down and we took some trees out and it's all cleared.
Kind of a silly question, not so much for you, but for Val. I'm looking at the lot size. Is the lot size conforming with R2 requirements for minimum space?
Yes, I believe R2, you just need 5,000 square feet.
Okay, and this is 70, almost 8,000, I believe. If it's 75, what did you say?
I think it's 120, something like that deep. We spoke with Steve at the city office before we presented the zoning change, and he thought the main concern was the width, because you got a 7-foot setback on both sides, but that still allows for 60 feet building in the front.
So if they're doing a duplex, so not a single family attached, you need 6,000 square feet for the duplex, 3,000 for each side.
Okay.
And we've got that, I take it?
I believe we looked at this before.
Okay, that was the only reason a few years back, we ran into one where, yeah, we passed it and no, we didn't have the area. Like, I don't see it on the app. I thought we always used to ask for lot square footage. I don't see it.
Say 5 by 130.
Okay. No, I was missing it wherever.
97.
Okay,
9750.
satisfied.
Okay. All right, any further questions?
I think I got a phone call today from one of the people that live around there. What their main, from what I understand, the main concern was, spot zoning was brought up, which I think you kind of addressed that in your initial statement. And the other concern was crime rate and what a duplex would do for crime rates in that area. So, I mean, obviously with the, where you're gonna be with what you're trying to build there, I mean, you tore out an abandoned home that,
Yep.
you know, obviously, and you're improving that
Yeah,
neighborhood.
we're trying to clean it up, and I think there's some other people in the neighborhood that are fixing up the neighborhood.
So I felt obligated to state what was asked of me, so.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. Anyone else wishing to come forward to make public comment? If not, I will ask Beth for Planning Commission report.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on September 19, 2017, at the request of Trevor Borgman Construction LLC to consider a zoning change from R1 to R2 at 2221 Jackson, and the item was tabled in order to obtain more information and removed from the table on October 17th at the Planning Commission meeting, and the Planning Commission recommends approval of the request on a 7-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing and move to item number 43. Look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5506, approving a zoning change from R1 to R2 at 221 Jackson Avenue.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion for consideration of ordinance number 5506.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Any further discussion on this? Not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of the ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5506 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5506 on second, third.
Second.
Okay, motion is second to suspend the rules. If no discussion on that, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5506 carries on second and third.
Okay, moving to item number 44. We'll open this public hearing at the request of Gerhold Incorporated for a final plan development on property generally located half-mile south from the intersection of Omaha Avenue and South 25th Street. And Val, again, you get the honors for kicking off this discussion.
This is the final plan development that you all saw the preliminary plan development here a few weeks ago. This was passed at Planning Commission, I believe, on a 7-1 vote. And this is the plan that will set some stricter or less strict rules, I guess you could say. The plan development's the one that they're asking for, like, front yard setback relief from what is actually the SR zoning. This gives them that relief without going to the Board of Adjustment. So it gives them different rules if you apply this plan development that they would normally not get in a straight zoning category.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. John Zwingman with Advanced Consulting Engineering Services. I'm here representing the developers for the Majestic Lake final plan development. The final plan development that you have before you is substantially consistent with what was approved, the preliminary plan development, which was approved by you, and then the final plan development, which was approved by the Planning Commission. There were some changes requested, suggested, whatever, by city staff as they completed their review. Some of those changes include, and I think, Steve, did you document the changes to them already? So some of the, just to throw it out there, some of the state changes included making the lake access and the road a lot so that those could be maintained and owned by the homeowners association. The easement, there's also some wording that went in there. The easement from 37th will also be maintained by the homeowners association. So those items were added. I think other than that, it's basically substantially consistent with what you had before, but I will answer any questions that you have at this time.
Have you entered anywhere in there that you won't come from 26th Street for access? I know you say you're coming from 37th. Is there anything in there that says you won't come from 26th?
I think you're probably asking 25th, is that
25th,
correct?
Yeah.
But we have not entered anything in there that says specifically that we will not.
Okay, so at any time that could happen?
I guess I'll probably let Mr. Brogan talk about that. But our current intent is to come from 37th Street. And that's where the easement comes from, serving the property, and that's what is stated in the plan development.
Okay. Any questions for John? Thank you, John. This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to make comment, do so now. Twice in one night, Mr. Wood.
It's a double header. I would tell you this, Tim Brogan again, speaking on behalf. This has been one of those long, drawn-out processes, and it can be frustrating for city, it can be frustrating for the owners, the developers, and things of that nature. But this is the product we now bring to you. This product is kind of a compilation of collaboration in the sense that I think all parties involved got a little something and didn't get things. My clients really didn't want a planned development, and concerns from the city regarding that of them able to lot split later and have more homes out there than not was protected by the planned development. Mr. Jackson, a good question about the 25th Street. To answer your question, I would answer it this way, is that this planned development is for 80 acres. None of the 80 acres is joins or abuts 25th Street. We have it positively asserted on there that our only access will be 37th Street by way of the easement, which is described. You ask, can we just change it anytime we want? I think that's a great question. That's a concern. I would say the only way we can do that, if we make change to the planned development, we have to come back. That's part of one of the concessions we made with the planned development with the city.
It says your planned development property area is 161 acres.
I stand corrected. I thought it was 280s, but it was, yeah, 160. It's 280s is what I thought it was, about a quarter section, so.
And what I'm looking at is we've got a lot of industry out there that has stood up and said that they're not in favor of this. And I believe we should stand with our industry. Now, that being said, they could, I don't want to see them come off of 25th Street. And if it's not in there that they say they won't, then down the road they possibly could.
The only way that would happen, in speaking with council this evening or late this afternoon, is there protections for, and we're talking about Volcraft here, let's just say what it is.
Yeah. No, I
Volcraft has been one of the objectors, and with that being said, we do want to have that protection, and I think they get that by way of this planned development, because for us to make a change, we have to come back through a public process.
Okay.
And it's a great, fair question, because I think everybody's been keenly aware, one of the greatest concerns has been the 25th Street access as well as multiple lot splits on this subdivision. We're marketing towards high-end homes with large acreage, or large acres, multiple acres. And I think we've addressed that 25th Street concern. I think council's going to speak to that. But we've been listening to our neighbors. We didn't want to go up 37th Street. We didn't want to go a mile further west, but that's the commitment we've made. So I think we got protections in place. I can understand Nucor saying they might come out 25th Street. I will tell you this much. I do have a concern in the sense that, but we didn't get there because I think my clients have just as much right to that public street that tax dollars pay for as anybody, but we're not going to go down that road because we're going out 37th Street. Any questions? This is one of those compilations, collaborations. We're excited to get some housing, some nice housing in the area. I think this does that. Is it perfect in the sense that everybody was happy at the end? No, but I think it's going to be good for the city moving forward.
Mayor, can I ask Tim a question?
Sure.
It's not appropriate for a lawyer to ask another lawyer a question.
Tim, I understand that the plan development you have to come back to change the plan development.
Correct.
But if you merely acquire the access to 25th Street, there's no need to change the plan development to go to 25th Street.
That'd be a true statement.
So back to my original statement, is it possible that they could go to 25th Street?
I guess it would. I mean, yeah, it's not our.
Without being worded in there.
That's a good question, a good point by council. Not our intention, not our desire. I guess the answer is.
We could put it in there saying you wouldn't.
The answer is we won't do that. We've been asked that by the planning commission. They asked for the same thing before they had passed this, and our response was this: I don't know what's going to happen in the future out there on that area, and I'm not going to advise my client to restrict his access to 25th Street. But our plan is to go out 37th Street, and that's what we're putting before the council. If you would have told me there was going to be daycare in the area, I would have thought you were a fool. I mean, I've lived in this Norfolk my whole life, and that was all swampland out there, and now we have church and daycare and things like that. The other thing, I would never have seen that coming. The other thing I would say this is, if, the next property to the north, if you're going to make us or restrict us from using 25th Street, even though our land doesn't abut there at this time, you're right, but could they? I would say this is, what are you going to make and request and require of the land to the north if it's sold that they can't ever have access to 25th Street? I mean, they might have more volumes than.
Conform to the comprehensive plan, their industry.
If that's what it goes for.
Right now, that's what it's zoned for.
But that would be my concern.
Right. I can understand.
It's a city street and everybody has access to it, and so, but right now, we don't even join it or butt it. It's not our intentions.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I would imagine you're the engineer guy to ask about sewers and
He'd
all
be
that.
right back here.
Yeah.
Any other questions for legal?
Thank you, Tim.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
Waving you off.
Thank you. Get out of here. Got it.
So they're not gonna pave streets out there?
Not at the current time, whether later, there's a waiver there's a request for waiver,
Right.
for the paving of the streets.
They're gonna have, septic tanks?
Yeah, wells and septic tanks will be constructed out there.
Now, some of those lots, the flood zone that's out there comes into part of the lots, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Steve, what's the ruling on placing septic tanks in a floodplain? Is there a ruling against that, or are there steps they have to take to do that?
I cannot answer that question off the top of my head. John, are you aware?
Yeah, the DEQ titles that, request that if the septic system and leach field are constructed, that it must be constructed at or above the, base flood elevation. And there's also some separation, same way with the bulletin 1001. If separated by an adequate distance, then it could be constructed at a lower level. But everything out there would have to be designed and installed by a licensed installer, and they would have to sign off on that construction prior to putting it in. So you can't just go put your own in. Everything would have to be put in by a licensed installer or licensed.
So my concern is if, down the road, if it does flood again, if it gets in that flood zone way, the precautions they would have to have in place.
All I can say is that we'll have to meet the requirements of the title from DEQ that governs those items.
And all the properties out there, I noticed some of them, they say that, lots 1 through 9, they have some property that's, below the bank of the Elkhorn. Does that mean they own riverland? They're gonna be owning part of the river?
The property, out there would extend out.
Into the river?
Yes.
Okay, so if that changes, then their property changes?
No, their property is set. It's not set at center line of the river. It's not accretion
But I
ground.
mean, as far as livable,
Yes, sir.
so if it would flood, that's the floodway along there. That will get eaten away if it does flood again. I mean, that doesn't even have to be a 500-year flood. It could be high rivers.
That
That'll get
property,
eaten away.
that property could change.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then what do you do then when it goes below the 3 acres? With the septic
Well, they still
tanks?
own the property. They still own the
I
property.
understand that, but I mean, the
So-
codes say they have to have 3 acres. Are you doing anything to shore these,
Actually,
shore these banks up so they don't erode away?
no, not as planned as part of this development. And you can put a septic tank on a lot that's smaller than 3 acres. You just have to meet minimum setback requirements. So you have to be so far from the floodplain elevation. You have to be so far from a well. You have to be so far from,
I thought you had to have so many acres, Steve, to put in a septic tank.
that's incorrect. If you do it by Title 129, you can put it in down to something that's 0.75 acres, as long as you meet minimum setback requirements.
In the zoning?
The city does?
As I say,
The city does.
According to the zoning, 3 acres, right, Val?
I
For
believe
septic.
it's 3,
Yeah.
Okay. So the
it's-
city,
It's both in the city and the state, because the city has,
well, the state lets you put in lower.
if you follow like soils and things
Correct.
like that, so I believe the city has mirrored the general state that says 3 acres, and so that's what our code says too.
So basically, I mean, if there is erosion in that lot, if you couldn't meet the setbacks, then you wouldn't be able to put a septic tank in there, if you can't meet the setbacks.
Right, so, I mean, are you gonna do anything to kind of protect the buyer and maybe put something at their shore those, to shore that up?
No, we're not gonna shore that up, that, as part of this development.
So that could change before they buy it, before it's sold.
Any other questions? Thank you, John. is a public hearing. Anyone else wishing to come forward can do so at this point.
Good evening. My name is Luke Henderson, and I'm appearing today on behalf of Volcraft Nucor. I'm the associate attorney for Mr. Mark Fitzgerald. Some of you may be familiar with him. He's been involved throughout this process, but unfortunately, due to a scheduling conflict, well, I guess I would say fortunately for you guys, you get to see me tonight. But I believe there is a letter attached to the agenda from Mr. Fitzgerald that was submitted to the commission. That basically outlines Volcraft and Nucor's position on this issue. I won't bore you. You guys are familiar with it. We are asking, well, let me back up a little bit. Volcraft and Nucor support this residential development. The only opposition they have is involving 25th Street, and that being the access point for the development. And our concerns with the planned development proposed is the fact that the development does not contain any specific language regarding them not intending to use 25th Street. Now, I understand that you heard argument or testimony from Mr. Brogan that that's not the intent and that they don't want to agree to that because of the future. Well, we're here today asking that you guys consider modifying that plan for the reason that we feel that that would provide adequate protection for Volcraft, Nucor, the other adjacent property owners, which would require any amendment to the development plan to go through the city council and the commission. It's our understanding that the potential, and Clint, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that section 27-238 could arguably exclude the city council and the commission from being considered, or from considering any proposed amendment to the planned development. And so I know Mr. Brogan said to you guys that we can't predict the future. Well, if the future changes, there are potential remedies they can pursue in changing it. But at this point in time, why don't we protect the parties that are interested in this matter by making it clear, and especially if it is their intent. And so with that said, I would open it up to any questions.
So while Clint's digging for that, I guess, so you, from what you were reading about the provision there, is that, because my interpretation was that a change to the CUP would require council and planning commission approval, and so change in the access, which would be separate from what's shown here on the CUP, would be a change in the CUP, and that it would have to come before. But you're telling me, you're saying that the section, and I'm not a lawyer. I didn't do the extra 4 years or whatever, so.
That's kind of the understanding I had was that.
Well, I would defer to legal counsel on that.
Well, it's our position that section 27-238 of the code actually could arguably authorize the zoning official of approving any amendment to the developed plan. So we think you can eliminate that issue if that's the real clear intent by requiring this language. And by requiring that language, I think there's a stronger argument that 27-238 would not relate to any proposed change then through the zoning official and require the actual process through the planning commission and the city council, as it would clearly be contrary to the intent of the development that was approved.
So that being said, in your argument and Mr. Brogan's argument, a compromise provision in there I would propose is that any change in access as a condition to the CUP, any change in access to the property would have to come before the planning commission and city council.
That would be a compromise that,
to me, that sounds like a compromise that should be acceptable by both parties that way.
and I would agree that that would resolve the risk for both parties going forward, because the only real risk we have is we want to have an opportunity to be heard an opportunity of notice if there is ever a change requiring the access being from 20th Street. That's all we're asking for, and that's why we think that language needs to be a part of that. And your proposal would also allow for that as well.
I think we're not clear right now whether that needs to be spelled out. I think it may be built in that any change in access would have to come back before a public body. So we'll gain some legal clarity on that.
Can I speak to that? Hope so.
Yes, if you can shed some light on the legal clarity needed on this.
27-238, and it talks about amendments to the plan development overlay, and what it says is, it says, after the application for a plan development has been approved, including the specific final plan required under this article, the zoning official is authorized to approve amendments to the final plan, provided that. So what 27-238 sets forward are things that the planning, that Val, the zoning official, Val, in her capacity, can change without it coming back to you, okay? I think that there's two differences here. I think that the access to 37th Street that's provided for, contemplated, whatever, is in place. If you merely add another access, if you also go to 25th Street, if the property's acquired, the easement's required, or whatever, you don't need to change the plan development to go to 25th Street.
Right.
You only need to change the plan development if you're getting rid of going to 37th Street. So the provision that was talked about in part of those discussions was, and if you were going to embrace that, I think the way you would embrace it would to address the concern that Mr. Henderson's client has talked about, is that there shall be no access, that is, no access from the plan development to 25th Street. If that's the case, and there is a violation of the plan development, it can either be an ordinance violation, which could be fined, there can be a fine from it, or you could modify the plan development, but realistically, you're probably talking about a fine, I would assume, if there was access that was provided, and the code that's in place now says that a violation of any of the provisions that would be approved by the city council, any violation of that can be a penalty of up to $500 a day. So I don't know if that makes it clearer or not.
That's why I was questioning whether we could add the condition that change in access would require a review of the CUP. Because that then takes it away
Going beyond
from the plan,
determination of
from
the
the
zoning official.
zoning official, and throws it back.
I just one quick question.
Yes.
Once you'd have to buy the property, plat a road to 25th, have that all approved by the same council. At that time, wouldn't you be saying, listen, this isn't what we've stated that we have to go to 37th. I think with that, I would imagine that would bring up all this back, bring it all back in front of the council at that time, with the way it's written today.
Well, I think one of the concerns is, I could be corrected, and certainly Mr. Brogan will if I'm wrong. I think one of the developers or the persons involved with developing it actually owns the property. And I believe there's already an potentially existing access already.
Right.
So,
There's an easement, but you'd have to pave and put a road in and plot that, bring that in front, and that plot would have to then be approved by this board.
I don't
Sure,
think
the
that's-
process of that, creating that access would come before this body.
I don't think you have to have minimum access, you have to have access to the development. If you create additional access, this board or the planning commission, this council or the planning commission doesn't need to approve an additional access being added.
To your point though, a plat for paving access,
I don't know, what would that process entail? Well, if you bought the property, because now we're talking about 25th, if you bought the property, had an easement already on the property, and then you came and wanted to put a road in to 25th, what would that take? What's the process there? Would that trigger us to be up here again saying, I don't know why, you know, we're going to 30, I mean, are we?
The county would first have to accept the fact that there's gonna be a road there. And just build the road. Private, require access.
And this is gonna be considered a, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The only way to do it without coming in for a private road, but they would still need, there'd be some public function, because they'd need access to 25th through the county. The county would have to grant access to 25th.
So if that became the intent someday, the process in which it would happen would come before a public body. Okay.
But not necessarily this public body.
Correct.
And so we in essence really do lose control of it. Yeah, I mean, it could go to the county and
We've
I just feel
exercised
that
a
for-
lot of control here in terms of essentially dictating what access is being planned for right now. If we're speaking frankly about it. And I wonder, Mr. Henderson, if any provision here naming public street and restriction would create any legal pitfalls for us, restricting access to a public road.
Not that I'm aware of, obviously. I have to look into that, but like, I just want to clarify our intent is just to clarify the intent and issue as we speak and as it's presented today. That's not preventing them from presenting at a later date. It's only basically requiring fair notice and a fair opportunity to all the other owners.
Any further questions? Mr. Henderson?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. It's a public hearing. Anyone else wishing to come forward?
Back historically on this one, this has been going around for a long time, as I noted earlier. And in my meetings with Mr. Mark Fitzgerald and Troy Brooks from Volcraft was real simple. Gentlemen, you go to 37th Street, you'll never hear another word from us. It wasn't an immediate acceptance by my clients. They didn't want to go to 37th Street. I can tell you there's a number of faces that sat through the subcommittee hearings and saw the angst and the struggles on this whole situation. My clients eventually conceded, went to 37th Street. Then late in the process, we get comments from Volcraft that you did that, but now we want one more thing. Folks didn't get everything here. My clients certainly didn't. Volcraft got what they wanted. Now they want one more thing. No, everybody conceded on certain points. We're done. This is a good housing development. It is time to pass this thing. I can tell you this much. What's interesting for me is that my clients have just as much right to that road. I mean, we're speculating out here 1 year, 20 years, 100 years, never. My clients have just as much right to use 25th Street as anybody, but they conceded and went to 37th Street. I appreciate the concern, and I heard Mr. Henderson at the end say that the homeowners or the landowners in the area should be notified. They would be under a public process if that ever would happen. But nonetheless, they still would have that right, and we're not arguing for that right now. But I think we tend to forget that this is a public road that's paid for by tax dollars paid by everybody. This is not Sarah's Lakes Road, and it's not just Volcraft's Road. Folks, this is a good deal here. Let's get it done. We did, and we conceded on a lot of issues per meetings with the subcommittee. It's time to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. Anyone else wish to come forward for the public hearing? If not, I will close this. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
just want to make another brief comment.
Mike, can you
My
state
name
your
is,
name?
I'm sorry, my name is Mike Chickus. I'm the plant manager at Nucor Coal Finish. And just want to make sure that our position is clear. We're not opposing the development. Our concern is 25th Street and the potential conflict with incompatible use down the road with residential and industrial use of that road in the future. And you know, if we want to expand it, if 25th Street is used as access to that residential area, and you know, we want to expand down the road, or if there's another industry that wants to move in, there could be opposition and conflict because of you know, industrial use of that road and residential use of that road. Those are our primary concerns with the access to that development down 25th Street. And just wanted to make sure that that was understood. And I agree this could be resolved if that language was put into the plan development, that 25th Street would not be used as access.
Questions for Mike? Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to come forward? If not, I'll close discussion and move to Planning Commission report. Please, Beth.
On October 3rd, 2017, the Planning Commission reviewed the final plan development for Majestic Lake Estates on property generally located 1/2 mile south of the intersection of Omaha Avenue and South 25th Street. The Planning Commission recommends approval on an 8-to-1 vote.
Okay. With that, I'll close the hearing and move to item number 45. Look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5507, approving the final planned development on property generally located 1/2 mile south from the intersection of Omaha Avenue and South 25th Street.
I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5507.
Second.
Okay, motion is second, and Steve, I think I'll ask you to introduce discussion on this, given that we have some changes from on this plan development from what we saw last time it was before us.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. I will review those changes to the plan development that have occurred since Planning Commission's approval. First would be there were two primary changes. The other changes, we took advantage of the fact that we were making changes to just update a couple other pieces of the PD. Primarily, the primary changes consisted of a title change. The original title included the words "in the plan development." We needed to take that out of the title, and so that change has been made. John had mentioned that we added 3 lots, a lot for Majestic Drive, a lot for the lake itself, and a lot for the access between the lake and Majestic Drive. The reason for that was just simply to make it easier to transfer those 3 lots by calling them a lot versus some very complicated meets and bounds description. I will read some changes to the PD itself. The PD would be those line items 1 through 18. We modified line 1 from 31 lots to 34 lots, again as a function of adding those 3 lots. We changed on line 11, we changed the words lake access to now lot 23. In line 14, we added a statement with regard to line or to access for 37th Street and who would hold ownership of that and maintain that. It would be held in ownership by the HOA in a private agreement with that landowner that they're going to get access across. Finally, line 15, we changed the last sentence again to add lots 22, 23, and 24 of block 1 and that was a function of, again, adding those lots. Finally, it came to our attention that there was a lien holder on the property, and so a signature block was added for consent of the lien holder. So those were the changes to the PD. Any questions?
Any questions for Steve on those changes? So Steve, those changes represent revisions from the previous draft of the plan development. These to be adopted and enacted would need to be
Right. You would need an
adopted by us in the form of an amendment.
amendment to the plan development, yeah.
Questions on that? Do we have a motion for an amendment reflecting the changes as Steve outlined?
I'll make that motion, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, a motion is second. Discussion on that amendment?
From what I'm gathering, most of those are really just clarifications on ownership and items along that line. They're not really,
Correct. The majority of those changes had to do with adding lots 22, 23, and 24, just to simplify the future transfer of those lots to a homeowners association.
right.
Okay, a motion is second for amendment reflecting the changes. Any further discussion on that? If not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Which takes us back to the underlying consideration of ordinance number 5507. Further discussions, council? Discussion, comments?
And the thing that's most troubling to me about this whole thing is that, and as I was approached on it even as late as Friday of this past week, was that I was given pretty much the assurance that if access was going to be granted to 25th Street at some point in time, that it would come back before this body. And I believe from the conversations, what I am getting from this is that, no, it could come, they could actually get access to this via the path to the east, coincidentally owned by one of the owners, and pave it on out as a private drive, and we as the governing body would not see it. The governing body that would see it and would take it out of our hands necessarily would be the county. And that doesn't create a great comfort level with what I was led to believe. And I was not talking to Mr. Brogan or any other legal services at that time, so, that's, to me, disconcerting. And I hear the argument that, yes, this is a public street out there, but it was a public street with this property not near at this density considered. So we're making a change in density. I would assume that there should be some, and I've heard there's been plenty of give and take there, but this bothers me. So, because again, it takes it back out of our hands.
So we all understand that any change on access would come to the zoning official, in this case, our city planner, but not to the city council. So that determination by the zoning official doesn't give you a comfort level either.
I'm not sure that would even have to come to the zoning official. Because if you're doing a private drive on the property to the east, that is not something that comes to the zoning official. I believe I'm correct on that? Because it'd be no different than if you came on your property and decided, we don't permit paving. So there's nothing stopping them from paving a portion along through there and it being used as an access. There's no approval permit-wise, and I do not believe that that paving things come before the zoning officials. So, no, I think the mere thing is that the county would have to address access to 25th Street. And, again, it takes it out of our hands. Or either our hands or the hands of the city council at, as Mr. Brogan proposed, maybe in 15 or 20 years from now, things change that way. It takes it out of the hands of this body.
Other thoughts on that, council?
I think that, when you're considering this, we need to consider Nucor Volcraft. We need to consider them. They do need the room to expand out there. There's, the way the comprehensive plan is designed, there are tons of areas that heavy of industry can expand. And so I think that it's a pretty small thing to say, hey, let's throw in there no access from 25th Street to protect that area for Nucor. I know it's a public street, I get that. But at the same time, these businesses provide a lot of jobs in town that help pay the taxes for those streets. So I don't see that there would be a big issue to show a good faith and protection towards the industries that are out there and hopefully future industries by saying they're gonna only go from 37th Street and they agree to put in there no access from 25th. Maybe down the road, like Mr. Broger said, that down the road, maybe that can change. And they can come back and ask for it to be changed, but to have it in a position where it can just happen on a whim, that's not good faith towards the industry that's there. And I know they're a business, but the city owes quite a bit to the big industries here in town and all the businesses here in town. And if one of them asks for some assistance in this way, it's not that big of a deal. At least it wasn't when they said they'd come for 37th, so it shouldn't be that big a deal if we say, let's just make it stop and no going to 25th.
Further comments?
This is just a question about cup. So if you state in here that your only access is gonna be to 37, which it does, and then you change the way you access out of your exit and entry, or your access into your development, doesn't that say you're not, you change the way you're using your stated, what's stated right in front of us? Would that be in the language in the code? The language in the code, I mean, isn't that already?
The PD says access will be from 37th Street, but it does not say only 37th Street. So that's where, I mean, even if you add in that one little word, I think it would probably take care of it.
Comment?
And I don't know if that was ever broached with the developers or with Mr. Gerhold or not, but as Ms. Grimes noted, the addition of only 37th Street that would bring it back before this body.
Yeah. Or
Is that-
or a proposal to say that any change to stated access under the current agreement would would come before a public body. Which was what you had proposed earlier. So, what's before us now is the amended final plat and development. We have a motion and a second on what you see before us for any changes to be made at this point, and nothing precludes an amendment to be proposed at this point in discussion. Is that correct, Clint?
An amendment to the ordinance?
No, amendment to the CUP, to either adding only or adding any change in the access.
Right, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
That would be a modification to the plan development that's before you. The ordinance approves that, so you're really changing the provisions that are in the plan development if you were going to modify that to add only or do something.
But for somebody to make a motion for an amendment right now, would have to withdraw the original motion on the underlying ordinance currently.
No, you've already got a motion for the ordinance in front of you with the modifications, with the changes that have come forward since it was approved at the planning commission that Steve articulated. So you've got a motion ready for you to vote on or to amend.
Or amend, so, okay.
And you would amend it by modifying one of those, are they one of those conditions? What are they entitled on here?
They're off to the side there, those 18.
Are they're on the plat?
Yeah,
Yeah, number 18.
So I think bottom line is here, this has been a long, arduous journey for everyone, developers, the property owners, the neighbors. We're at this point, I think we need to make a decision once and for all, so people have some certainty in regards to planning. In order to do that, I'm sensing there's some desire to potentially further amend what we have before us. And it sounds like the options for that are specifically outlining only access to 37th or preparing a framework in which the stated access as it is now, if it should change, must come back before this public body. So do I hear an amendment to either?
Your Honor, I would move an amendment to basically item 18 of the conditions of the CUP, and that being merely the addition of only at the point of access to the addition will be from, and at that point add only 37th Street as shown on the plan.
Okay, so there's a motion to amend line 18 with the word only.
Yeah, well, that's what it's done.
I don't have it in front of me, Jim, so.
Yeah, it's, item 18 is access to the addition will be from 37th Street as shown on the plan. And in lieu of that, the condition the amendment proposes adding only.
Access to the addition will be only from. Is that what you're proposing?
Yes.
Second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. I'll open it to discussion. Just, you can approach,
You're
yes.
amending the application of my client, and,
Yes.
that's not something they want to have changed. And so I think it's important that you folks know that's the position of my clients, because it's their application that started all this. And so I think it's only fair that you know their position, is they don't want the insertion of the only or those things. So I think it's only fair you hear that, so.
And I understand that, most of us agree that you're gonna come off 37th, which is what we asked you to do. I have a hard time changing that to make you do that. But if it's a safety zone and we say, you know, down the road, you'll at least come back and talk to us, might be a conversation we should have. I don't know if you need to take a minute and ask. I'm still willing to believe that you're going to the 37th, because that's what you're saying. And I agree with you, and we made some amends, you gave us some amends, so I'm with you. But the couple that aren't, you know, we need to resolve, you know, I'd like to see this go through, so.
Yeah, and I appreciate there's a couple who are dissenting, but let me.
They don't want to do that, and we can't force them to.
Right.
No, if they want the thing to go on its merit, we'll go with what we got.
The other alternative, as I stated before, was something discussed earlier, and that we write into this through amendment that any change from the stated access as it currently is comes back before city council for deliberation.
I think that would be wise language to
But
put in this, because currently, this body is being asked to carry a lot of weight to do the heavy lifting on this project. And it doesn't make sense to me that in the future, all of the decision-making that we're doing here could be turned upside down by the county.
Right.
Without deliberation from this body. So if we can find a way to put language in there that any change to access other than 37th Street be run back in front of either the planning commission and this body, which I believe is what would happen, I think that would be prudent.
But
That's kind of what I was asking them. I agree with you. I want to see what they say. If they absolutely say no, then we need to relook at this, or they need to, and, you know, maybe not make a decision.
In my opinion, that kind of language doesn't lock them into.
Right. Gets this thing moving forward.
Brings it back.
But it gives them an option down the road, like they said, in 20 years when we don't know what's going to happen. Gives them an option on what's going to happen, but they can come back and ask, so. But it gets it done tonight, where we get going.
Okay,
So,
that being said, though, I believe we've got a amendment motion on the floor that needs to be voted on before we can do any, correct me if I'm wrong.
there's a motion and a second.
Well,
On the,
was asked by Councilman Faust if I talked to my clients, and I have, and they would not support this amendment. I would just tell you that. So you asked me to speak to them, so I did. Thank you.
any input, Mr. Brogan, on the alternative proposal?
I certainly wish I did.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, given where we're at, there's a motion for an amendment to line 18 on the plan development document, changing, as stated, access to the addition will be from 37th Street as shown in the plan, to access to the addition will be only from 37th Street as shown on the plan. There's a motion and a second. We've had discussion. As a reminder that this, you vote on this, does not preclude further amendment after this vote. We have not moved from the underlying ordinance.
So we're essentially just voting on the amendment.
We're voting on,
stated by
Yes.
we're voting on this option to address some of the concerns that have been stated. Does not preclude other options from being introduced. So,
Okay.
any questions or comments on that
Well,
before we vote?
I got one comment. I can understand maybe only 37th not being there, but to say you're not going to put in there that you will come back and request and go through the planning commission and through the council to go to 25th Street. To say you're not willing to put that option in there, I think speaks to volume.
I'd have to, what I'm getting from this is that they've moved a lot on this development and they're frustrated. And that's what you're seeing right here.
Frustrated. There's flooding that can happen out there. I'm frustrated about that. But I'm looking at some changes and things that can happen. And I'm willing to bend and say, okay, as long as that's stipulated. And now you want to, ignore the requests of big businesses in town and
I don't think anybody's ignoring any request by big business. That's why we're here today, looking at the
and
proposed
that's-
changes.
and
So
we're
that we-
asking them not to go to 25th Street.
So don't be putting words in my mouth about,
They're going to
No.
37 because Volcraft.
exactly, that's what we've,
And
that's,
I've put in
that's
there
why
a
we've been
motion,
working on this for
instead of
18
Jim
months.
bringing a motion about only going to 37th, and they don't wanna do that.
Well, that's what's before us right now, so
the amendment.
we now have the opportunity to vote on whether you want to enact that or not. So, no further discussion. Please vote.
Voting in favor of the motion to amend to add the word only, council members Langy, Merrill, Jackson Faust. Voting against the motion, council members Granquist, Clausen, Murin, File.
Guess what?
It's a tie.
Better earn your money, Mayor.
Time to earn the big bucks.
Voting no, which I think preserves another option for us, which is the one I stated before, building into the current plan development some framework in which any access changing from what's stated on the plan comes back to the city council for deliberation.
That was the second thing they were asked, and they said no.
That's okay. I think that gets to the concerns that were stated here, that it comes back to the deliberating body. It's not as restrictive as the first option necessarily. It leaves, still leaves open for debate at any future time, whether access, any alternative access from what's already stated should be granted. To me, it seems to be a reasonable compromise.
And you're looking for a motion on that amendment?
Motion
And I did the original, and it did not pass. Again, my major concern is that this body, not necessarily this group of people, but this body in the end has the opportunity to review changes in access. And so with that being said, I would make that motion that an additional condition to this would be that changes in the access to the property would have to come back before the city council for review and approval.
Second.
Okay. Motion is second. Beth, you have that. To the effect of any change in access as currently stated in the final development must be brought back to a public process before the city council.
And a vote
Is that
yes.
fair?
Yes, that's correct.
A vote yes passes that with that stipulation.
A vote yes.
It passes
Just
the
pass
amendment.
that amendment.
Yes.
So,
And then I may,
Okay.
Mr. Jackson mentioned that was offered once before, and my clients hold to their commitment to 37th Street, so they would not be supportive of this amendment. They put the plan development in front of you as 37th Street only, or it's not only, but 37th Street. That's what they're gonna hold to, that's their commitment, and so they would not support this amendment. So I think it's only fair that you know that as well, so.
and so that being said, if the amendment passes, are they gonna withdraw then?
Most likely.
Okay.
I mean, they put the plan development, it's their application. I appreciate you have the ability to modify or amend or things like
No,
that.
that was my
Yeah,
only
fair
question.
question.
If it's added, is,
It's different than what they had presented and
Yeah.
committed. So I think that's fair that you know that.
this is probably on first reading. I mean, if we pass it, it may give them time to think about it. Maybe they'll
Which would have to come
think it
Well,
over.
no,
right?
What?
They'll withdraw.
Ultimately.
If they don't withdraw, I mean, let it sit, think about it for a few days.
is plan unit development a 3 hearing situation before us?
What's the
What?
question?
The approval of the plan unit development, is it a 3
This,
It's,
hearing?
It's an ordinance.
It's an
Three
ordinance.
readings.
3 readings.
And we're at the second one
It's an
right
ordinance.
now.
It's an ordinance. No, you're.
We're at
on-
the first one?
You're on the
Okay.
first reading, you're talking about.
So
the zoning.
I guess as
Yes.
Councilman Faust addressed it, yes. If we pass the amendment, then we end up voting on the plan unit development in first reading. And unless the owners decided to pull it before we even voted on it, or do they have that option?
Well, I don't,
No, I'm legal.
I think you've traditionally viewed that the application can be removed at any point in time if somebody wants to remove the application.
Just voting on the amendment, right, not the actual
Right.
PD. So
Correct.
if you vote yes on the amendment and then they decide they don't like that, then they can pull it, because you haven't voted on the PD, right?
Well, they would,
That-
my question though was, they could pull it, or they could actually see how the first hearing goes on it, and then, as Councilman Faust addressed, they would have at least a time period in there of anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks before second and/or before third
Right.
reading to reconsider whether they wanted to write it on out or whether they wanted to pull it. It's kind of, a gambler's card you can fold at any point along through there,
I'm
so.
confused by pull it. Is pull it, the ordinance is yours to deal with at the council. The application is theirs, is the applicant's to deal with. The applicant cannot pull the ordinance.
right, if they pulled the application, there'd be no reason to take up the ordinance on second reading. Okay.
And just to throw something else in here, voting
Please do.
wise, while we're here, because I did forget it in the introduction, that this is a zoning change and we do have a 20% opposition to this, and it is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan, so therefore you need to pass it on 6 votes, not 5. I just wanted to point that out again.
Which means the underlying ordinance, not necessarily any amendments at this point, right?
I
Right.
think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, all right. One further clarification on that, I know there's amendment on the floor, but bringing it back to a public process, yeah.
What, I asked the mayor if I could have a little discussion with you, Val. If you look at 27-238, which Mr. Henderson noted, what that does is that talks about after you've done a plan development, it says the zoning official is authorized to make approve amendments to the final plan, and then it goes, provided that, and then it goes through 1 through 7. Number 8 is, any amendment that's not in conformance or authorized by this section shall be submitted to the planning commission in the same manner as the original application for PD overlay designation. My question was, in regard to the discussion that the council's having about this coming back to the council, does it come back to the council, or does it go as, if it was an amendment to the plan, it really needs to go back to the planning commission and then comes to the council? So just so that there's that clarity, and I think the motion just talked about coming back to the council, so that's another thing.
I think that was the intent, coming back to a public process with.
Yes.
Okay. Is that reflected in the? Okay, okay. So the motion is to, before I get into it, one more time, yeah.
Change in access to the property would have to come back to the public process for review and approval,
Okay,
which would be the council and the planning commission is the end.
right.
I guess our position still is not to approve the amendment. We think you have protections in place, kind of what my earlier comment was. So I guess our position is not to have the amendment go through, but a vote on the plan division, or the plan development, with the understanding they still have that ability, if they amend the plan, to come back. So that's our position.
Okay,
Any questions? Sorry.
thank you. Okay, everybody clear on what we're voting on?
Yes.
Any further discussion? No. Okay, please vote.
Voting in favor of the amendment, council members Langy, Merrill, Murin, Jackson, Faust, File. Voting against the amendment, Councilman Granquist and Clausen. Motion carries.
Okay. Takes us back to the underlying ordinance as amended with the changes as Steve outlined them to the plan development that we saw last time and the amendment that we just approved. Any further discussion or questions before we vote?
So we're voting to approve
We're voting to approve ordinance number 5507, approving the final plan development as amended in the previous two successful amendments. Discussion, comments? Seeing none, we can go straight to a vote, right, Beth? Or something? Okay, please vote.
Voting in favor of ordinance number 5507 on first reading with the amendments as discussed, council members Granquist, Langy, Merrill, Clausen, Murin, Faust, File. Voting against the ordinance, Councilman Jackson. Ordinance 5507 carries on first reading.
Okay. Moves us to item number 46. Open this public hearing at the request of Gerhold Incorporated to consider a hard surfacing waiver on property generally located a half-mile south from the intersection of Omaha Avenue and South 25th Street. Val, you want to kick off discussion? Anything to say on this?
Like you said, this is a hard surfacing waiver for both the access, easement, private road, and the loop road that goes around. They're asking for a hard surfacing waiver to only gravel it with this for 20 years is what their request is.
Okay. Questions for Val on that? Any public comment? Are we still in the hearing? Public comment on this? Hard surfacing waiver?
What you have in front of you is a waiver for hard surfacing of this road. Basically, it states that we're not going to hard surface it at this time. If after 20 years it's not hard surfaced, they either would have to hard surface or apply for another waiver. And in the interim, if the property owners voted to have it hard surfaced, they could do that.
Okay, thanks, John. Straightforward. Any questions, comments? This is a public hearing. Anyone else wishing to come forward? Why not?
Man, it's getting good tonight.
You could get a chair closer to the podium.
Thank you. I would suggest, in light of the last vote and where my client's position is that if we could just do a first reading at this time, that's all I would request. One other point I would make is that this hard surfacing, remember the access is gravel, so we're coming off 37th Street, which is gravel, through an easement, which is gravel. So that's another point just to bring up. Thank you.
And just for clarification, there's just one reading on this. It's either granted or not, so. Any other public comment? Seeing none, Planning Commission report, please, Beth.
On October 3rd, 2017, the Norfolk Planning Commission reviewed the application for a temporary modification of the hard surfacing requirements submitted by Gerhold Inc. The application submitted following City Code 27351 is requested for the property generally located 1/2 mile west, 1/2 mile south of the intersection of Omaha Avenue and South 25th Street to be known as Majestic Lake Estates. The Planning Commission recommends approval on the hard surfacing waiver on a 9-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing.